Okay. Um, so in section 124, verse 27 to like 50 something, it says, or Jesus says, to build a temple whereby the Most High can come dwell therein, that he might restore the fullness of the priesthood which he has taken from you. So Jesus later on says, and I'm just giving a very brief synopsis on this. He says that if they don't do what they were told, that all these bad things were going to happen and that the church would be cursed, not cursed, rejected. So, like, the Father never came to restore the fullness of the priesthood. No temple, the temple was never built. The Shekinah glory of God never came upon that temple. So, the church was rejected. That's why Brigham never saw God, never saw angels, never received a revelation. He basically taught what he was taught by Joseph Smith, not because he knew it himself. Although, anybody can receive inspiration and direction. So I think he was inspired and directed, but the temple was never finished, and the Father never came to restore the fullness. So it's entirely likely that the church may have had the Aaronic priesthood, and that was it. And then there was other things that happened after that. So Joseph Smith said if you change the ordinances, you change the priesthood, and they changed the ordinances. So there's that. And then in 1921, Heber J. Grant actually changed the method of priesthood conferral, where actually they didn't confer priesthood at all. They only ordained to offices. And you can see this in any church missionary handbook manual from 1921 until David O. McKay came in and changed it back in 1957. So all during the tenure of Heber J. Grant and George Albert Smith, the church did not confer priesthood. They only ordained offices. Charles Penrose was the one that suggested this to Joseph F. Smith. And Joseph F. Smith said that if they brought it up again, that he would have Charles Penrose, who was an apostle, excommunicated from the church. But when Joseph F. Smith died, Heber J. Grant went along with it. And then David O. McKay, when he became president of the church, he tried to change it back and go back and fix all of those priesthood lines of authority that were not conferred properly. Well, they had to have unanimous decision within the first presidency in Quorum of the 12, which they didn't get. And so they just let it go. So a lot of people don't even have priesthood anymore after that. There were some lines of authority that went through the LDS Church where, they retained their priesthood line of authority, but most of the church didn't have it. The Fundamentalist Church kept their lines of authority pure and conferred priesthood properly, but not within the LDS Church. So, so there's that. And then in 2013, I was told by the Father to sever the ordinances of all the holy people using the authority he gave me, which is a prophecy in Daniel chapter 12. And I did that in July of 2013. So priesthood doesn't exist within the LDS Church. All right, so I want to get back to the deacon question. Now, isn't it interesting that the deacons are supposed to pass the sacrament to the individual, right? Well, what happens when that sacrament is taken by a person without priesthood, the tray, and like my sister sits next to me like when I'm a kid, or a teenager, whatever, or my mom, and passes me the sacrament. Now, does that make it so that the sacrament's not valid? You know, because it's a woman or somebody without priesthood actually passing me the sacrament? That's a question that you can consider. But as far as the church actually even having priesthood, that was severed in July of 2013. And that prophecy of that is in Daniel chapter 12, when it talks about the man clothed in linen raising his arms to the air, to the square, and severing the power of all the holy people. Well, the power, and this is a last days prophecy, that power is the priesthood, and the holy people are the saints. So, and the reason God did that is for a hard reset, because the church had gone so far out of the way, because of the conferral problem with Heber J. Grant from 1921 to 1957, and the fact that they were disobedient. Jesus said he would reject them as a church with their dead if they didn't do what he said. And that what he said was build a temple whereby the Father, the Most High, could come dwell therein, that he might restore that which was lost unto you, or that which was taken away, even the fullness of the priesthood. And that never happened. So all of this authority that the LDS Church claims was actually lost in Nauvoo, because the church was rejected in Nauvoo. The LDS temple was only built up to the second story. Barely started doing the second story when Joseph died. They were stealing money out of the temple funds to build the city, and they were stealing the lumber coming down from Wisconsin to build the temple, to build their homes and their mansions. Brigham Young was working on the second wing of his mansion when Joseph died. The Masonic temple was complete, but the temple of God was not being completed. They were dragging their feet with something called the temple tithe, where they consecrated one day in 10 to actually work on the temple. So it's a big mess, and the church has just lied and gaslighted and changed history and whitewashed and all sorts of stuff. But the reason why Revelation went from a heavy flow with Joseph Smith to barely a trickle after that, and then finally just stopping altogether after 1890, is because they have been rejected. So there's a lot of truth within the LDS Church, but with the changing in ordinances, the changing in the gospel, the changing in the temple, they've lost favor with God. So anyway, I don't know how to explain it. That's the simplest I can explain it. I know, 8-minute video already, so I'm just gonna leave it at that, and I don't know, watch it a couple times if you need to. But thanks for asking the question anyway.